Good evening, my friends. I want to begin tonight with a confession. Most of what I have taught you over the years, the techniques, the methods, the practices, I have watched you learn beautifully. You understand SATs. You understand revision. You understand living from the end, the inner conversation, the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You have learned all of it. And still, for many of you, the desire hasn't fully arrived. And tonight I want to tell you exactly why. Not because the techniques are wrong, they are right. Not because you are incapable or unworthy or doing something fundamentally mistaken. You are not. But because there is one skill, the foundational skill, the skill that determines whether everything else works or doesn't, that nobody has taught you directly. How to stay, how to remain in the state after you have entered it, how to hold the assumption when the world presses back against it, how to dwell in the wish fulfilled, not for 20 minutes during your practice, but as a permanent residence, a home you live in, not a hotel you occasionally visit. Because here is the truth I need you to hear clearly tonight. The secret of manifestation is not in entering the state. You have entered it many times. You know what it feels like. You have had those moments of genuine, felt, real assumption when for a luminous minute or an hour you actually were the person who had the thing. The secret is in remaining. And tonight, I am going to teach you exactly how to do that. Let me show you the pattern that is destroying most manifestations before they arrive. It is almost universal. I have seen it so many times it has become predictable. A person discovers these teachings. Something ignites. They practice with genuine enthusiasm. Their sats is vivid. Their feeling is real. They fall asleep genuinely in the wish fulfilled. And something in them recognizes, yes, this is true. I can feel that this is real. They wake up the next morning, and before they have even fully arrived in consciousness, before they have taken a single deliberate breath, the first movement of their mind is toward the mirror. Has anything changed? They check their phone. They review their circumstances. They scan their reality for evidence that last night's assumption is taking physical form. And it isn't. Of course it isn't. Not yet. Not visibly. Not in the hours since they went to sleep. And in that moment, that single, quiet, devastatingly ordinary moment of checking, they leave the state. Not dramatically. Not with a crisis of faith. Just a quiet return to the familiar. It hasn't happened yet. I'm still in the same circumstances. I'm still the same person in the same situation. And from that moment, they are no longer creating from the wish fulfilled. They are creating from the wish not yet fulfilled, from waiting, from hoping, from the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And the law, which has no opinion, which simply produces the physical equivalent of whatever state is most consistently occupied, faithfully delivers more of the same. More waiting, more gap, more not yet. This is the cycle. And tonight, this cycle ends. First, I need to give you a precise understanding of what a state actually is. Because most people misunderstand this, and the misunderstanding makes staying in the state seem harder than it is. A state is not a mood. It is not an emotion. It is not a temporary feeling that rises and falls with circumstances. A state is a complete way of being, a total constellation of consciousness, how you think, what you assume without thinking, what you take for granted, how you interpret what happens to you, what you expect the world to show you, what feels normal and natural, and simply how things are. Think of consciousness as an infinite mansion. Each room in that mansion is a complete, fully furnished, entirely self-contained state. The room of poverty is a complete state. In that room, everything reflects poverty. The thoughts that arise are poverty thoughts. The feelings are poverty feelings. The view from every window shows a poverty world. Nothing in that room contradicts itself. The room of wealth is equally complete, equally real, equally furnished, with its own consistent thoughts, feelings, assumptions, and view of the world. Both rooms exist. Both are real. Both are available. You are always in one of them. The question is never whether you are in a state you cannot not be in a state. The question is only which state are you dwelling in? And dwelling is the crucial word, because most people visit their desired state. They step into the room of wealth for 20 minutes during their practice, feel the reality of it, and then when the practice ends, step back out, return down the corridor, re-enter the room they came from. This is not dwelling. Dwelling means you have moved in, you have unpacked your things, you have learned where the light switches are. You have established that this is your home, not the other room, not the room you used to live in, but here. This is where you live now. And the world outside must reflect the room you are living in, not the room you occasionally visit, the room you inhabit. Here is how you begin each day as someone who is learning to dwell. The moment you wake, before you move, before you reach for your phone, before you begin the unconscious process of inventorying your circumstances, you have a window. A small, precious, enormously powerful window. In those first drowsy seconds between sleep and full waking, your conscious mind is still soft. The defenses are down. The habitual patterns have not yet reasserted themselves. You are, in those moments, more permeable to assumption than at almost any other time in your day. This is your morning opportunity. And it takes 30 seconds. Before anything else, before the phone, before the news, before any thought about what needs to happen today, you simply choose your dwelling. Where am I living today? And then you feel it. Not extensively, not elaborately, just a genuine 30-second occupying of the state of the wish fulfilled. You are that person. You have that thing. This is your life, not someday, but now, in the only place that creates, in consciousness. 30 seconds, and then you get up and move into your day from that room. This morning establishing of state creates something that most people never have: momentum. It is far easier to stay in a state you began your day in than to try to enter it midday from a standing start. The morning 30 seconds does not just give you a good feeling to start the day. It sets the operating system from which everything else runs. Do this every morning, without exception, before anything else. This single practice, sustained consistently, will transform what is possible for you. Now, you will fall out of the state. I want to say this clearly and without any drama attached to it. You will fall out. Of course you will. You are changing deeply grooved patterns of consciousness that have been running for years, decades. New patterns require repetition before they become automatic. Old patterns are deeply familiar and will reassert themselves with a persistence and subtlety that at first you will not always catch in time. So you will drift. Someone will say something that triggers the old story. You will see a circumstance that seems to contradict your assumption so directly that the logical mind simply cannot be quiet about it. A thought will arise from the old state with such familiarity, such convincing authority, that before you realize it, you have followed it back down the corridor and re-entered the old room. This is not failure. This is learning. The only failure is in not noticing, or in noticing and giving up. The practice, the entire practice, the simple core of everything I am teaching tonight is this: notice when you have left, return immediately. That is the whole of it. Not never leaving, returning when you do. Think of yourself as a guard at the door of your own consciousness, not a guard who prevents every unwanted thought from knocking that is impossible and exhausting. A guard who simply refuses to let them in, take off their coat, and settle at the table. A doubt knocks. You see it. Ah, that is the old state trying to pull me back, and you don't engage. You don't argue with it, try to prove it wrong, follow its logic, or spend 30 minutes examining whether it might be right. You simply don't open the door. You turn back, You return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and you are home. This notice and return, over and over, as many times as necessary, is how the new state becomes permanent. Not through one heroic act of commitment, but through 1,000 small, unglamorous, consistent acts of returning. I want to speak carefully about your inner conversation, because it is the most important thing I could tell you about staying in the state, and it is the most neglected. Right now, as you read these words, there is a voice in your head. It is always there. It has been there since you were old enough to think. It comments, judges, worries, plans, remembers, anticipates, a ceaseless flow of inner speech that constitutes the background noise of your entire conscious experience. And that background noise is either keeping you in the desired state or continuously undermining it. Listen to what your inner voice says about your desire during an ordinary day. Not during your practice, during the moments when you are not consciously thinking about any of this. Is it saying, I hope this works? When will it come? It's been so long. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. What if it doesn't happen for me? Or is it saying, this is done. I am grateful. This is mine. I am so pleased with how this has come together. The first is the inner conversation of the old state. The second is the inner conversation of someone dwelling in the wish fulfilled. And here is the thing that most people don't understand about the inner conversation. It is not just a reflection of the state you are in. It is one of the primary things keeping you in that state. When your inner background noise is the voice of lack and waiting and doubt, you cannot dwell in the state of having. The noise creates the state as much as the state creates the noise. They feed each other. So the practice is this. Listen. Not to judge, not to fight, simply to notice. What is the background conversation right now? Is it the voice of the room you want to live in, or the room you are trying to leave? When you catch it saying something from the old state, stop it. Not with force, not with anger, not with a long argument. Just stop it the way you might turn off a program you didn't mean to start. And replace it. Not with desperate affirmation, not with positive thinking you don't believe, with the quiet, natural, conversational voice of someone for whom the desire is simply already real. Old voice. I'm still broke. When will money finally come? New voice. I am abundant. Money moves easily through my life. Old voice. Still no word from them. Maybe they don't care. New voice. I am loved. My relationships are warm and real. Old voice. The symptoms are still there. What if I never get better? New voice. My body knows how to heal. I am whole. Not once, not twice. Throughout the day, every time you catch the old voice, you make the shift. And gradually, as you persist in this, the new voice becomes the background noise. Not because you have forced it, but because repetition deepens grooves. The new conversation has been heard often enough that it has begun to feel natural. And naturalness is the sign that you have truly moved rooms. Let me give you 3 anchors, 3 specific practices that will keep you rooted in the state when everything around you is trying to pull you back to the old one. The first anchor is the feeling. Throughout your day, not just during your practice, not just in the morning, return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Briefly, 30 seconds, every hour if you can. You don't need to close your eyes. You don't need to enter a meditative state. You simply, in the middle of whatever you are doing, let the feeling of already having wash through you. The feeling of being wealthy, of being loved, of being healthy, of being the person who has the thing. 30 seconds. Then continue with your day. This hourly returning to the feeling is your anchor point. Consciousness cannot drift very far from the desired state when you are returning to it every hour. The drift happens in the long, unmonitored stretches the hours when you are entirely absorbed in the outer world and have forgotten entirely what you are. The hourly return prevents those stretches from becoming the default. Make it a habit. Set a reminder if you need to, until it becomes automatic. Every hour, 30 seconds, back to the feeling. You will be astonished at how quickly this stabilizes the state. The second anchor is gratitude. Not generic gratitude for generic blessings. Specific gratitude for the specific desire as though it is already in your possession. Thank you that this is done. Thank you for my abundance. Thank you for this love. Thank you that my health is restored. Thank you. Not thank you that it will come. Thank you that it is. Why is gratitude such a powerful anchor? Because gratitude is structurally incompatible with the state of lack. You cannot genuinely, felt level, thank someone for something you believe you don't have. The act of genuine gratitude assumes possession. It requires you to be, in that moment, the person who has already received. Gratitude locks you into the state more reliably than almost any other single practice. Throughout your day, whenever you think of your desire, not with the anxious, has it come yet, but with a brief, genuine thank you that this is done, you are reinforcing the assumption of already having. And the assumption of already having is the state. The third anchor is evening revision. Every night, before your SATS practice, take 5 minutes. Review the day. Not to judge it, not to catalog your failures, not to feel guilty about the times you fell out of the state, but to revise the moments that didn't serve you. Find the moments where you drifted, the conversation that triggered doubt, the circumstance that shook you, the old pattern that reasserted itself unexpectedly. You know which ones they are. They left a residue. And revise them. Replay each one in imagination, but this time from the desired state. The conversation where someone said something that shook you. Hear their words again, but this time feel yourself remaining utterly unmoved in your assumption. The moment you checked your circumstances and felt fear, see yourself looking at the same circumstances with the settled peace of someone who knows the inner reality is already established. The old thought that pulled you back, see yourself noticing it with gentle detachment and returning calmly to your dwelling. This revision serves two purposes. The first is to clear what the day created. You are, through imagination, rewriting the day so that in consciousness you remained in the state throughout. You are healing the damage before you go to sleep. The second is to rehearse. Every time you imagine yourself remaining in the state during a challenging moment, you are practicing. And practice creates pattern. Tomorrow, when a similar moment arrives, you will be more likely to respond from the desired state, not because you forced it, but because you have already done it in imagination, enough times for it to feel familiar. This three-anchor system, the hourly feeling, the constant gratitude, the evening revision held together with the morning establishment of state, is a complete daily architecture for dwelling in the wish fulfilled. Not visiting, dwelling. Now let me address the thing that breaks most people. The wait. Not the first day, not the first week, but the second week, the third week, the month that becomes 2 months, and the desire is still not physically present. And something in you begins to quietly wonder, am I doing this wrong? Is it working? Is there something I'm missing? Is this my fault? I want to tell you what this is. It is the old state sending its most sophisticated agents, not the obvious doubts, those you have learned to dismiss, but the subtle ones, the reasonable ones, the ones that dress themselves in the language of intellectual honesty and self-awareness. I'm just being realistic. I'm just examining whether this is working. I'm just asking a legitimate question. And they are not illegitimate. The questions are real. The uncertainty is real. The absence of physical evidence is real. But here is what you must understand about the evidence you are not yet seeing. What you currently see is not your present assumption made physical. It is your past assumption made physical. The physical world is always the last to reflect a change in consciousness. Always. It was not built overnight, and it does not rebuild overnight. The circumstances you are currently seeing were created by the state you occupied weeks, months, perhaps years ago. They are not news, they are history. When you look at your circumstances and feel doubt because they haven't changed yet, you are letting history determine your present assumption. You are giving a past state power over a present consciousness. The thing to do, the only thing to do, when the evidence seems to contradict your assumption, is to remember this. The echo has not yet caught up to the voice. You have changed the voice, you have moved rooms. The echo, the physical reflection, is still bouncing back from the old position. But it is moving. It is always moving. And your job, your only job, is to stay in the room long enough for the echo to arrive. Let me tell you how you will know that you have truly learned to stay in the state. There is a word for this: Sabbath. In its deepest sense, Sabbath is not a day of the week. It is a state of consciousness. It is the rest that follows completed work, the settled knowing of someone who has done what needed to be done and can now simply wait in peace for the harvest. When you can imagine your desire, assume it, feel it, and then let it go, not abandon it, not forget it, but simply rest in the knowing that it is done, without the anxious need to check, to monitor, to analyze whether it is working. When you can wake up in the morning and move through your day as the person who has the desire, not thinking constantly about when it will come, not scanning every interaction for evidence, simply being who you are in the desired state, as naturally and unremarkably as you are the person who has a name and a face and a history. When the desire becomes not exciting and special but normal, you have entered Sabbath. And Sabbath is the sign that the manifestation is imminent. Because normalness, that quality of it simply being how things are, the unremarkable, taken for granted naturalness of complete possession, means there is no longer any resistance, no split consciousness, no doubt running in the background, no part of you still living in the old room. You are fully, completely, unreservedly in the desired state. And consciousness, occupied completely and without resistance in any state, must produce the physical equivalent of that state. Not might, must, because that is the law. Here is what I want to leave you with tonight. Staying in the state is not about perfection. Let me say that clearly, because I know some of you, the most serious, the most earnest, the ones who care most deeply, are going to try to do this perfectly and then punish yourselves when you don't. You will fall out of the state many times, especially at first. That is not failure. That is the practice. Staying in the state is not the achievement of someone who never drifts. It is the practice of someone who every single time they drift returns, without drama, without self-recrimination, without the exhausting secondary spiral of being upset about having been upset. Just, oh, I drifted, I am back now. And back they are. Every return strengthens the new pattern. Every return makes the desired state more familiar, more natural, more automatic. Every return shortens the drift and lengthens the dwelling, until, without quite being able to point to the moment it changed, you realize that the desired state is simply where you live now. The old room feels distant, unfamiliar, not quite you. The new room is home. And the physical world, which has been faithful all along, which has been reflecting your states with perfect precision your whole life, even when you didn't know it, begins to show you, in the external landscape of your actual life, the room you have been inhabiting inside. Choose your state now, not someday, now. In the only dimension that creates, in consciousness, in this present moment, you are the person who has the desire. It is done. You are home. Stay there. Come back when you drift. And stay there. That is the whole law. In 4 words, stay in the state. Good evening. This is Neville Lectures. I'll see you again in the next video.